This tutorial was brought to you thanks to the supporters on the screen. Check out TAPgiles.com to find more Dreams resources, donate to support my work, or engage my services to get private instruction or help on a project one-on-one. The previous tutorials, linked in the description, showed how to make logic that allows the player to assign a button to trigger a mechanic. Now we'll make logic to save their configuration and restore it when the scene starts. So the next part is saving and restoring. So we're going to save using persistent variables, and then we're going to have some other logic that runs at the start of the scene to use those values of the persistent variables to move those to the right positions again. Right, so over here we're going to actually set stuff. We're going to set the variable, and we'll store the variable in there as well, So we'll have a variable called jump assigned, and that will go from 0, so I'll just delete that. I'm using L1 and square to add these, and this will go up to 4. So 0 means it's not assigned, and 4 means triangle, and 1 means x, square will be 2, and circle will be 3. So this just, so it kind of stores which button was assigned to it. Cool, so then in here we'll actually want to set it depending on what button is next to it. So we'll find that out by sending the ID that it should save from the actual button itself, using the same method we did with the Wi-Fi stuff. So we'll have a transmitter here that will be called trigger ID, like that. This will listen for that in the same place. Let's just copy this. So this will be trigger ID, and for now I'll just output what we're getting so we know the numbers are correct, and then we just send whatever number we want to store. So we can do that, and this will go from 1 to 4, I guess. Oh, I did less. Cool, so now I can just set this from 1 to 4. So this will be 1 because it's the X, and I'm going to go in clockwise from X onwards. So at the moment this doesn't receive anything unless I assign X to be jump. So if I press X, now it's getting 1 out of here. So we can set this to be that number. So I'll now use a variable modifier and tweak it, and give it the name of this jump assigned. And we'll set it continuously while powered, and the value we want is from here, so just wire that into the operation value. Cool, so if we just double check by outputting the actual variable number, then when we assign X, it's outputting 1, and we'll just set the same thing up down here. Whoa. This will be number 2. So when we assign X, it's 1. If we assign square, it's 2. I think I'll just have quick debugging node here. So I'm going to turn that off so it doesn't reset. So if I press X to assign it, now it's saving 1. If I press square, now it's saving 2. If I press X again, it's kicked out the number 2, so now it's saving 1 again. So now we've got a way of saving what button is assigned to jump. So let's do the same for dash. So now we want to restore the settings at the start of the scene. So we'll do that in this chip up here. So we have like a central chip where all the central stuff is. So what do we need to do for this? We need to do exactly the same process of putting this into assign mode, and then turning on jump, assign to jump, and then turning on the correct trigger to move to there using these same keyframes. So, but we need to do that one after the other, not all at the same time, otherwise it'll get very messed up. So let's have a timeline to kind of order things. So you can put any gadget in a timeline, and it will just power those gadgets in the same order in the same kind of time. So we'll click on the clock time to turn it into beats time with X, and now we have these columns, and we can just slot things into the columns. But actually, ideally, each restoration mapping thing should just take one frame of logic, which is 1/30 of a second. So if you use L1 and X to expand this, L1 and right to expand this, then you'll start seeing these columns. These columns are the frames of logic. So each one of these columns is a 30th of a second. So we can put all our logic to assign jump into one column and all our logic to assign dash into the next column. And then we're kind of done. First we'll kind of fake it without using the variable modifiers to actually get the real stored value, so that we can easily debug it and change the settings. So I'll just use a value slider and just drag it from the right edge with R2 so that it snaps to this column. Actually, first let's just quickly make these other buttons so that we have all the buttons sorted out. So now we have IDs for all of them and keyframes for all of them. We can copy these keyframes over here. And remember, what we're storing is a number between 1 and 4. So we can actually use a selector and wire that number into the active port. So if I just demonstrate what's going on there, this will have 5 slots because you've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I give it a different number, it will set it to that slot. So 0 is A, and 1 is B, and it kind of rounds down, and then 2 is C, and so on. So here we're telling it which of these channels to be active and which channels should be sending out a signal. So then if we're in B, we should power the A which assigns X to whatever we're looking at, and C should be square, and triangle, circle. We need to set this to something. So this should be between 1 and 4. Cool, so that's setting 1, so it should move X over to jump when we play time. So it does. And then we'll have another one for the dash, and we'll say that that is going to be 3, which will be triangle. And wire that into it as well. So when this is powered, it's going to be sending a signal to tell it what to do. And then when on the next frame, this will be powered, which will send a signal to tell it what to do. But they'll both assign to the same thing, which is why it's kicking the other one out. Now we need to actually copy this into here. So first we're going to assign to jump, then we're going to assign to dash. And I'll play time. And now X assigned to jump and triangle assigned to dash. That's because this has the value of 1 and that has the value of 3, just like it would do if we'd assigned it with these variables. So now we'll just move those down and we'll copy these out. So jump assigned, and instead of setting it, we'll get it, which means it'll send it out of this port here, and we'll just wire that in. And we'll have the dash assigned. We need to turn these off. So if we actually tweak the timeline and go into the second tab, there's this show sidebar, which means we can turn off that whole row, and now all the gadgets, even when the playhead goes over it, won't do anything. The next problem is, this is constantly trying to assign, so as soon as we start time, it's trying to set it to 0 because nothing is in there. So we'll need to turn these off while we're loading it up again, while we're loading the settings. So we'll just go and have a keyframe that turns off the storing variable modifier for jump and dash. And that will last until there. So if we set that to being 2 for square, that's setting to square. So this is kind of simulating if we'd set it and come into a different scene and whatever. Now all we need to do to make it persistent is just turn on persist in dream. And then if we have those variables in a scene, and this chip and this whole setup in a scene, it will just sort itself out and it will communicate with the player automatically. Let's try that now. And press X, and now we can jump. Yay! And then we can get back up here, and we can get back up here to get to the dash on lock. This doesn't have text on it, but we can press square, and now it does a dash, which sends us off the side of the earth. Let's go back up here, and see if we can dash to the exit. Dash! Oh, oh, oh! And then get to the exit. Yay! And that triggers it all the way. So, there you go. That's how you do that. You could probably do it in numerous other ways, but this way kind of lets you not have to have tons and tons of logic crammed into one place with all the different combinations and whatnot. And it uses the fact that the Wi-Fi can be zoned within the scene, and then you can just move objects around to communicate with each other. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to get 5 hours of tutorials early for $3. Here's a preview of what you can learn if you choose to become a supporter.